The office was buzzing with the usual Monday morning energy. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, and employees rushing to meet deadlines. But amidst the routine chaos, one man sat comfortably in his large glass office, sipping on his overpriced espresso, watching over his employees like a king surveying his kingdom. That man was Logan Whitman, CEO of Whitman & Coulter, a company known for its high-stakes deals and ruthless corporate culture. Logan had it all: money, power, and an ego big enough to fill the entire building. He never hesitated to remind people who was in charge, and if you weren't part of his inner circle, you were invisible. To him, success was about dominance, and if you didn't fit his version of a winner, you weren't worth his time. Enter Maya Brooks, smart, hardworking, and more than qualified for her role as a senior marketing strategist. She had been with the company for over 3 years, but no matter how hard she worked, it felt like she was always overlooked, while others got praised. For average work, Maya's ideas were often dismissed, or worse, stolen by colleagues who took credit for them. She had learned to brush it off, until today. Today was different. The team had spent weeks preparing for the biggest pitch of the year, a high-profile client who could take the company to new heights. Maya had poured her heart into the presentation, staying late nights, refining every slide, and ensuring every number was backed by solid research. She knew this was her chance to finally prove herself. The entire team gathered in the sleek conference room as Logan walked in, radiating his usual air of superiority. Dressed in an expensive tailored suit, he barely acknowledged anyone before, taking a seat at the head of the table. "All right," he sighed, checking his watch. "Let's make this quick." Maya took a deep breath and stood up, ready to present. But before she could even get past her first slide, Logan leaned back, in his chair, smirking. "Hold on," he interrupted. "You're leading this." His tone was laced with disbelief. The room fell silent. Maya hesitated for a second. "Yes, I've been leading this project for the past month," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Logan chuckled under his breath. "That's cute," he said, exchanging amused glances with a few of his executives. "Listen, Maya, I get it. You want to make your mark, but let's be real. These big deals require experience, leadership. Maybe someone else should take over." Maya felt her stomach tighten. She had expected pushback, but the outright dismissal, in front of everyone. Her colleagues shifted awkwardly in their seats, some looking away, others too afraid to speak up. She could feel the heat rising to her cheeks, but she wasn't going to back down. "Not this time. Mr. Whitman," she said, keeping her voice even. "I understand your concerns, but I've spent weeks analyzing this data. I know this project inside and out, and I believe my strategy will secure the client's trust." Logan smirked again, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. "That's adorable, really. But let's not waste everyone's time. Why don't we have Greg handle it instead?" He gestured to one of the senior executives, a man who had barely contributed to the project, but was always first in line for credit. A few quiet gasps filled the room. Maya clenched her fists under the table. She had worked too hard for this moment to let it slip away. "With all due respect, sir," she said, voice firm, "if you give Greg the presentation, he won't be able to answer half the questions the client will ask. I can." Logan's smirk faded slightly, replaced by mild annoyance. "Maya," he sighed, rubbing his temple. "You're talented, sure. But let's be honest. You don't exactly fit the image of who we want leading these pitches." His words were smooth, casual, as if he hadn't just said something completely demeaning. Maya's heart pounded. She knew exactly what he meant, even if he didn't say it outright. It wasn't about experience. It was about who he thought deserved to be in the spotlight. And in his mind, it wasn't her. The tension in the room was suffocating. Some employees exchanged nervous glances, while others stared at the table, afraid to get involved. But then, something unexpected happened. One voice broke the silence. "I think Maya should present." All heads turned. The voice belonged to someone no one expected. One of the company's biggest clients, who had walked in just moments ago. Unnoticed by Logan. The client, a sharp-eyed businesswoman with years of experience, had been observing from the doorway. She had seen enough. Logan's confident expression faltered for the first time. "Oh, Ms. Reynolds," he stammered. "We were just discussing." She held up a hand, silencing him. "I don't need an explanation," she said. "I want to hear from the person who actually did the work." She turned to Maya. "Go ahead." Maya swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. She turned back to the screen, steadying herself. The room was still, all eyes on her. Logan, for once, had nothing to say, and just like that, everything changed. But what happened next? No one could have predicted. Maya steadied herself, taking a slow breath as she clicked to the next slide. The moment was bigger than she had imagined, but she wasn't going to let fear control her. She had fought too hard, worked too late, and sacrificed too much to let someone else take what was hers. She could feel Logan's eyes on her, a mixture of frustration and disbelief flashing across his face. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone like her, but for the first time, he had no choice but to sit back and watch. As Maya spoke, her voice grew stronger, more confident. She walked through every detail of the strategy, laying out the research, the projected results, and the risks they had accounted for. She had built this plan from the ground up, and now, in front of everyone, she was proving exactly why she was the best person for the job. The client, Ms. Reynolds, nodded along, taking notes, occasionally glancing over at Logan, who now sat stiffly in his chair. The rest of the team, those who had once dismissed her, were now sitting up, actually listening. A few exchanged looks, as if realizing for the first time just how much they had underestimated her. Greg, the executive Logan had tried to push forward, shifted uncomfortably. It was clear that if he had been the one presenting, he wouldn't have had half the answers Maya had. Even he knew it. By the time she reached the final slide, the room was silent. Maya set the clicker down, turning to face Ms. Reynolds, who studied her for a long moment before finally speaking. "This," she said, tapping a pen against the table, "is exactly the kind of thinking we need." Maya's heart pounded in her chest. Had she heard that right? Reynolds turned to Logan, her expression unreadable. "I've worked with a lot of companies, Mr. Whitman," she said slowly. "And one thing I've learned, the strongest leaders know how to recognize true talent when they see it." Logan forced a tight smile. "Of course. That's why Maya's on the team." His tone was clipped, his usual arrogance now laced with forced politeness. He was scrambling, trying to save face. Ms. Reynolds wasn't buying it. She looked back at Maya. "I'd like to schedule a follow-up next week, with you leading the discussion." The words hit Maya like a wave. She had done it. She had proven herself. And now, for the first time, she was getting the recognition she had worked for. But as the meeting ended and people filed out of the room, Maya caught the glare Logan shot her way. It was brief, but clear. He wasn't happy, and something told her this wasn't over. Later that afternoon, as Maya sat at her desk, an email notification popped up. A meeting request. Logan. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard before she clicked it open. Conference room B. 4 p.m., no subject. A chill ran down her spine. She knew this wasn't just a casual check-in. As she walked into the smaller, dimly lit conference room, Logan was already there, arms crossed, staring out the window. He didn't look up as she entered. Instead, he let the silence drag for a few seconds before finally speaking. "You embarrassed me in there." His voice was calm, but the tension underneath was sharp. Maya kept her expression neutral. "I did my job." Logan turned to face her, his jaw tight. "You went against me." In front of a client, Maya met his gaze, refusing to shrink under his stare. "No," she corrected. "I did what was best for the company, and you know it." For a moment, Logan just studied her, as if seeing her for the first time. His usual smugness was gone, replaced by something else, something harder to read. "You think this changes anything?" he asked, voice low. "You think one presentation means you've won?" Maya didn't flinch. "It's not about winning," she said. "It's about being treated fairly. And after today, I know I deserve that." A slow smirk returned to Logan's face, but there was no amusement behind it, just cold calculation. "We'll see," he murmured, before walking past her, leaving her alone in the empty room. Maya exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. She had taken a step forward, but Logan wasn't the type to let things go. She had stood her ground today, but at what cost? What happened next? No one saw coming. Maya sat back down as the room slowly emptied, her heart still pounding from the moment that had just unfolded. She could hardly believe what had happened. After years of being overlooked, after all the time she had watched others take credit for her work, she had finally broken through. The client, the person who truly mattered, had seen her worth. But even in her small victory, she knew one thing for sure. Logan wasn't going to let this slide. As she gathered her notes, she caught glimpses of her colleagues whispering amongst themselves. Some gave her quick, approving nods, while others avoided her gaze entirely. It was clear. Her bold stance had changed the way people saw her, but whether that was a good thing or not, she wasn't sure yet. By the time she made it back to her desk, her inbox was flooded with emails, a few congratulatory messages from coworkers, some last-minute requests from other teams, and then an email from Logan's assistant. "Logan wants to see you in his office." Now, Maya took a slow breath. She had expected this. Logan wasn't the type of man to let someone challenge his authority, especially not in front of a client. But no matter what happened next, she refused to regret standing up for herself. She grabbed her notebook, straightened her blazer, and made her way to his office. Logan's office was nothing short of extravagant. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. His desk made of polished mahogany, and shelves lined with words that reminded everyone of his so-called brilliance. When Maya stepped inside, he was already seated, flipping through a stack of papers, acting as though she wasn't there. Finally, without looking up, he spoke. "Shut the door." Maya hesitated for half a second, before doing as he asked. "You think you pulled something impressive back there?" he asked, setting his papers down and folding his hands together. His tone was casual, almost amused, but Maya could see the tightness in his jaw. "I did my job," she said firmly. Logan chuckled under his breath. "Your job," he repeated, shaking his head. "Your job is to follow leadership, to understand how things work here." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Let me give you a piece of advice, Maya. You might think today was a win, but trust me, you just made things a whole lot harder for yourself." Maya felt the weight of his words, but she didn't let them show on her face. "With all due respect, sir," she said carefully, I believe I made things better for the company. The client wants results, and I delivered them. Logan let out a slow, measured breath. You really don't get it, do you? His eyes darkened slightly. It's not about results. It's about control. The words lingered in the air between them. Maya suddenly realized why Logan was so upset. It wasn't just that she had spoken up. It was that he had lost control of the situation. For the first time, someone had defied him in public. And worse, it had worked in her favor. I don't have time for this, he finally said, waving a dismissive hand. From now on, you run everything through me before speaking to any client. Understood? Maya stiffened. She knew what he was doing. He was trying to silence her, trying to push her back into the shadows. With all due respect, sir, she said again, carefully choosing her words. Ms. Reynolds specifically requested that I lead the follow-up meeting. Logan's lips pressed into a thin line. I'll handle Ms. Reynolds. A chill ran through Maya. That's not what she wants. Logan stood up, walking slowly around his desk. You don't seem to understand how this works, Maya. He paused, looking her directly in the eyes. People like you don't just get handed opportunities like this. You have to earn them. Maya felt her entire body tense. I did earn it. Logan smirked, shaking his head. No, you got lucky today, but luck runs out. He leaned in slightly. And if you think I'm going to let you walk in here and change the way I run my company, you're mistaken. Maya clenched her fists at her sides, but she refused to give him the reaction he wanted. She simply held her ground, refusing to let him intimidate her. I have work to do, she said, turning toward the door. Logan didn't stop her, but just as she reached for the handle, he spoke again. You should be careful, Maya, he said, casually. You never know when a mistake might cost you everything. Maya turned her head slightly, but didn't give him the satisfaction of a response. She simply walked out, her heart pounding. As she made her way back to her desk, her mind was racing. She had known Logan would be upset. But this was something else. He wasn't just angry. He was planning something. She could feel it. That evening, as Maya packed up to leave, she noticed Greg standing by the elevators, watching her. He hesitated for a moment before finally walking over. Hey, he said awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. That was intense. Maya gave a small shrug. Nothing I didn't expect. Greg sighed, looking away. Look, I know we don't talk much, but be careful. Logan doesn't like to lose. And when he feels threatened, he finds a way to fix it. Maya studied him. You sound like you've seen this happen before. Greg hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I have. Maya frowned. What happened? Greg shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if making sure no one else was listening. A couple years ago, there was another employee, a guy named Daniel. Really smart, probably one of the best we had. But he spoke up too much. Challenged Logan too many times. Greg swallowed hard. Next thing we knew, emails were being misplaced. Projects got reassigned. And suddenly, Daniel was being blamed for mistakes that weren't even his. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. And then, Greg sighed. One day he was just gone. No warnings, no explanation, just disappeared. Maya's stomach tightened. She had always suspected the company had a toxic culture. But this was something else. Greg hesitated before adding, I'm not saying it'll happen to you, but just watch your back. Maya nodded slowly, her mind racing. She had worked too hard to let Logan push her out. But if what Greg was saying was true, then she wasn't just dealing with office politics. She was dealing with a man who would do anything to maintain control. As she stepped into the elevator, she felt it deep in her gut. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. What happened next would change everything.